The wind in Wyoming doesn't just howl, it screams. And on the night the snow came, it was screaming a warning that Nathaniel Morgan was too late to hear. For 3 days, the world had been nothing but white, a thick, clean blanket of snow that covered the churned mud and the dark stains in the dirt. It covered the violence. From his window, Nathaniel watched his men carry two bodies toward the barn. They were heavy, stiff. The lantern light threw their shadows long and twisted across the snow, like ancient things crawling out of the earth. In the distance, just beyond his property line, a single, thin column of smoke clawed its way into the gray sky. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. He knew who it was, the same man who'd sent the riders, the same man who'd left his mark. "Papa." The voice was small, a tiny anchor in the storm of his thoughts. He turned. His daughter Lily stood in her nightgown, her golden hair a tangled mess from sleep. She was only 5, a flower trying to grow in frozen soil. She pointed a small finger toward the procession in the snow. "Why are they carrying Mr. Collins and Mr. Jacobson like that?" Death was a neighbor out here. Everyone knew its face. But this was different. This was masked men in the dead of night. This was the crack of gunfire and a message hacked into the barn door with a knife. Pay the blood debt. He wanted to shield her from that. He knelt, his knees cracking like old wood. He was 40 but felt 100. "They got hurt very badly, sweetheart," he said, his voice low. "They're going to rest in the barn until we can bury them proper." Lily's eyes, green just like her mother's, didn't seem to be looking at him. They looked right through him. "Mama says they're with the angels now." She said it simply, a fact, as if her mother, Eleanor, was standing right there beside them. Not 5 years gone, buried on the hill behind the house. That old tightness squeezed Nathaniel's chest. Lily's talks with her dead mother had started a year ago. The pastor called it grief. The housekeeper, Mrs. Porter, called it a gift. Nathaniel just called it terrifying. "I'm sure they are," he said, getting to his feet. "Now Mrs. Porter has your supper ready. I need to talk to the men." "You're getting your big gun, aren't you?" Lily's voice was suddenly sharp, old. "The bad men are coming back." Nathaniel froze. Every muscle in his body went tight. "What makes you say that, Lily?" "Mama told me." She looked him dead in the eye. "She says you have to go to town, tonight. There's someone at the train station. They need help." The conviction in her voice was absolute. The hairs on the back of Nathaniel's neck stood up. "Your mama? She said that?" Lily nodded, her face grim and serious. "She said, if you don't go, more people are going to die." A cold that had nothing to do with the blizzard seeped into his bones. He'd learned the hard way not to dismiss these conversations. The time she knew where he'd lost his pocket watch. The time she predicted a flash flood when the sky was clear blue. This was different. This felt darker. "Mrs. Porter," he called out. The housekeeper appeared so fast it was like she'd been waiting for a cue. Gwendolyn Porter was 65 and carried herself like a drill sergeant. Silver hair in a bun so tight it pulled at her scalp. She'd been a Union Army nurse, right alongside him when he was a surgeon. She'd seen the worst of men. She knew his nightmares because she shared some of them. "Sir," she said, her voice crisp. "I need to ride into town," he told her. "Keep Lily inside. Lock the doors. Tell Thomas to sleep in the main house tonight, not the bunkhouse." Mrs. Porter's eyes shot from Nathaniel to Lily, then back again. An entire conversation passed between them without a word. "And the reason for this trip? In a blizzard?" "A feeling," Nathaniel said. He couldn't bring himself to say he was taking orders from a ghost, channeled through his 5-year-old daughter. But Mrs. Porter just nodded. She'd seen too much of the world to question things that couldn't be explained. "I'll get the sleigh ready. The wagon won't make it." As she left, Nathaniel knelt in front of Lily again. "I need you to be brave. Stay with Mrs. Porter." She nodded, then wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, her face buried in his coat. "Be careful, Papa," she whispered into his collar. "Mama says the storm isn't just the snow." He held her for a second, then gently set her aside. He walked to the fireplace and took down the heavy Winchester rifle from its hooks. Whatever was waiting for him in town, he was going to be ready for it. The town of Fairview was a ghost town, huddled against the storm. The only lights came from the saloon and the sheriff's office. The blizzard had locked everyone else away. Snow piled in deep drifts against the boardwalks. Nathaniel drove the sleigh down the silent main street, his eyes scanning the darkness. He had no idea what he was looking for. Someone needs help at the train station. It was all he had to go on. He reached the small station at the edge of town. It was dark, shuttered. The last train had passed hours ago. The next one wasn't due for days, not until the tracks were clear. He pulled the sleigh to a stop. Maybe Lily had been wrong this time. A child's nightmare. Then he saw it. A flicker of movement on the platform bench. A dark shape in the swirling white. Someone was huddled there. He tied off the horses, his hand never leaving his rifle. He approached slowly, cautiously. A wrong move out here was your last move. The shape became a woman. She was wrapped in a thin coat, her head bowed against the biting wind. And in her arms she was clutching a bundle that moved. "Ma'am," Nathaniel called out, his voice low. "Are you all right?" Her head snapped up, fear, pure animal fear in her eyes. She pulled the bundle, the baby, closer to her chest. He could see it was wrapped in a simple shawl, nowhere near enough to protect it from this cold. "Please," she whispered, her voice snatched away by the wind. "Don't hurt us." He lowered the rifle, resting it against the railing. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Nathaniel Morgan." He held his hands up where she could see them. "You and your child are going to freeze to death out here." Her face was pale, her cheeks hollow. She was young, but life had been cruel to her. He could see it in the lines around her eyes. "There's no inn that will take us," she said. "Not without asking questions I can't answer." The baby whimpered. It was a weak, tired sound that scared Nathaniel more than any gunshot. His training as a doctor took over. "That child needs warmth. Now, come with me." She hesitated, her eyes darting into the darkness behind him, like she expected an army to appear from the shadows. "I'm a doctor," he said, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. "Your baby's lips are turning blue. Another hour out here, and he'll be gone." That broke through the fear. She stood up, shaky on her feet. "I have no money to pay you. I'm not asking for any." He grabbed his rifle and led her to the sleigh. "What's your name?" She paused as if deciding on a lie. "Abigail," she finally said. "Abigail Hayes. This is Samuel." The baby Samuel was barely moving now, the first stages of hypothermia. Nathaniel had seen it 100 times on the battlefield. "We need to go. Now!" As he helped her into the sleigh, he noticed she kept looking over her shoulder, scanning the storm-swept street. She wasn't just lost. She was running. The thought screamed at him to turn around, to leave her right there. He had enough trouble. His own war was brewing. But Lily's voice echoed in his head. "If you don't go, more people are going to die." He slapped the reins, and the sleigh cut through the deep snow, carrying them away from the desolate station and toward the ranch. A place that was supposed to be a sanctuary, but was quickly becoming a battlefield. The ride back was a fight against the wind. The snow was deeper now, the world a blinding white. Abigail shielded the baby with her body, a fragile defense against the storm's fury. But the child had gone silent, and silence was the enemy. "Keep him awake," Nathaniel shouted over the wind. "Talk to him. Rub his hands." Abigail nodded, her own face numb with cold. She unwrapped the baby just enough to chafe his tiny hands and feet. "Stay with me, Samuel," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Stay with your mama." The way she said mama was strange. It sounded practiced, like a word she was trying on for the first time. The lights of the ranch finally appeared, a faint yellow promise in the swirling chaos. Mrs. Porter was at the door, a lantern held high. And beside her, despite his orders, was Lily, bundled in her coat. "Who is this?" Mrs. Porter's voice was sharp as broken glass as he helped Abigail from the sleigh. "Abigail Hayes and her son, Samuel," Nathaniel said. "They were at the station. The baby's freezing. We need to warm him slowly." Mrs. Porter's eyes swept over them, a general inspecting new recruits. But the nurse in her won out over the suspicion. "Bring them in. I have warm water on the stove." Inside, the warmth was a physical shock. A huge fire roared in the stone hearth. It was a simple home, built for survival, not comfort. But Eleanor's touch was still there. In the hand-woven blankets, the dried wildflowers, the books stacked everywhere. "To the kitchen," Nathaniel ordered. "Basins of lukewarm water, not hot, and blankets, all of them." Lily trailed right behind them, her eyes locked on the bundle in Abigail's arms. There was a strange look on her face. Not just curiosity, recognition. "That's Samuel," she said, as if she was greeting an old friend. "Mama said he was cold." Abigail stopped dead in her tracks, her face a mask of confusion. "What did you say?" But Mrs. Porter pushed them forward. "Later. The baby first." The kitchen was the heart of the home. Nathaniel gently unwrapped Samuel, his doctor's hands assessing the damage. "About 8 months," he said softly. "Underweight. Hypothermia." He looked up at Abigail. "How long were you at that station?" "Since morning," she admitted. "The station master let us stay inside until he left for the night. I couldn't, I couldn't go to the hotel." Nathaniel didn't press. He showed her how to slowly warm the baby's hands and feet in the lukewarm water. Samuel began to cry, a thin, reedy wail. It was a good sign. Pain meant he was coming back to life. "I know, little man," Nathaniel soothed. "It hurts now, but it'll be better soon." "Will he be okay?" Abigail asked, her voice raw. "Children are strong," Nathaniel said, "but he needs food, rest." He looked at her, at the hollows in her cheeks. "And so do you." Mrs. Porter had already put stew and bread on the table. "Eat," she commanded Abigail. Abigail reached for the bread with a trembling hand. She ate slowly, like someone who had forgotten what food tasted like. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, he did," Lily piped up from a stool near the fire. "Mama said so." Abigail's eyes shot to the little girl. "Your mother told you about us?" Nathaniel and Mrs. Porter exchanged a look. "My wife Eleanor passed away 5 years ago," Nathaniel explained gently. "When Lily was born." Understanding, then confusion, washed over Abigail's face. She looked at Lily with a new kind of weariness. "I see." "Lily has a very active imagination," Mrs. Porter said, giving the girl a warning glance. "And it is well past her bedtime." But Lily didn't move. Her small face was serious. "You have a cut on your back," she said, looking straight at Abigail. "Under your dress. It's making you sick." Abigail's spoon dropped from her hand, clattering against the wooden table. "How could you possibly know that?" "Lily, that's enough," Nathaniel snapped. But his mind was already racing. He'd seen how she held herself, how she winced when she moved. "Mrs. Porter, take Lily to bed. Then bring me my medical bag." The housekeeper nodded grimly. When they were alone, Nathaniel turned to Abigail. She sat rigid, her hand protectively over Samuel. "Is she right?" he asked quietly. "Are you hurt?" Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. "It's nothing. Just a scratch." "Infected scratches kill people," he countered. "I was a surgeon in the war. I've seen men die from less." Her resolve crumbled. She looked down at Samuel, who was finally sleeping, his breathing even and deep. "It happened 3 days ago. I tried to clean it, but—" Mrs. Porter returned with his old leather medical bag. "I've made up the guest room. She'll need to take off that dress so the doctor can see the wound." Panic flashed in Abigail's eyes. "I can't. Samuel?" "I'll hold him," Mrs. Porter said, her voice softening just a fraction. "He'll be right here where you can see him." Abigail hesitated, then carefully passed the sleeping baby to the older woman. When she came back from the pantry, she was wearing one of Mrs. Porter's oversized nightgowns, her face flushed with fever. "Lie on the table," Nathaniel instructed, washing his hands in a basin. He lifted the back of the nightgown, and his blood ran cold. It wasn't a scratch. It wasn't an accident. A long, deep slash ran from her shoulder blade down to her waist. The skin around it was red, swollen, angry. It was infected. Badly. "This was a knife," he said, his voice tight with fury. "I need to clean it out and stitch it. It's going to hurt." "Do what you have to do," she whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the table. He worked quickly, cleaning the wound, stitching the flesh back together. She didn't make a sound except for a sharp intake of breath now and then. "Who did this to you?" he asked as he bandaged the wound. It doesn't matter, she whispered. We got away. Not far enough, I'd wager, Mrs. Porter said from her chair. Folks don't run into a Wyoming blizzard unless what's chasing them is a hell of a lot worse. I can leave in the morning, Abigail said, struggling to sit up. I don't want to bring my trouble here. You're in no shape to travel, Nathaniel said firmly, and that baby needs to recover. Besides, Mrs. Porter added, the roads will be snowed in for a week. You're not going anywhere. Desperation warred with exhaustion on Abigail's face. You don't understand, she said. The man I'm running from, he will find me. This man, Nathaniel said, a cold certainty settling in his gut. His name wouldn't be Harrison Blackwood, would it? All the color drained from Abigail's face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. How did you know that name? Nathaniel's jaw set like stone. Because Blackwood has been trying to take this ranch from me for years. Those men who were killed last night, they worked for him. Abigail clutched Samuel, who Mrs. Porter had just handed back to her. Then I've led him right to you. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, Nathaniel said. It seems Blackwood connects us, one way or another. He thought about Lily's strange message, the woman at the station. My daughter, she knew, he said, thinking out loud. She led me to you. Your daughter? Abigail asked, her voice a whisper. How did she know about my back? Nathaniel looked at Mrs. Porter. She gave a single, almost invisible nod. Lily, she sometimes knows things, he explained, things she has no way of knowing. Like a psychic? Abigail asked, her city skepticism battling with the impossible reality in front of her. More like a connection, Mrs. Porter clarified, to her mother. Eleanor was special. She could sense trouble coming. The housekeeper's face grew sad. Might have saved her if we'd paid more attention. Nathaniel felt that old, familiar guilt twist inside him. Eleanor had been afraid at the end. She'd said someone was watching the house. He'd told her it was just nerves. The point is, he said, forcing himself back to the present, you and Samuel are safer here than you are on the run. This ranch is built like a fortress. He didn't mention that 2 of his men were already dead. Abigail seemed to read his mind. The men who died, that was Blackwood. He nodded grimly. He's getting bolder. Used to be cut fences, rustled cattle. Now it's murder. And you think I have something that can help you, she said, her voice turning hard. It wasn't a question. I think our enemy is the same, Nathaniel corrected. And I think you know more about him than I do. You worked for him, didn't you? In St. Louis. Her silence was all the answer he needed. You need to rest, he said, seeing the exhaustion finally claim her. He turned to the housekeeper. Mrs. Porter, show Miss Hayes to her room. After they were gone, Nathaniel stared into the fire. An attack on his ranch. A message from his dead wife. A mysterious woman and a dying baby who turned out to be running from his greatest enemy. It was too much to be a coincidence. He pulled out his old pocket watch. Inside the cover was a tiny painting of Eleanor. Her green eyes, so much like Lily's, seemed to look right back at him. What are you trying to tell me, Ellie? He whispered to the empty room. What is this storm you sent me into? The only answer was the wind, howling like a hungry wolf outside the walls. Dawn broke over a world of white. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a silent, frozen landscape. Nathaniel was up before the sun, checking the stock, talking to his men. The mood in the bunkhouse was dark. Collins and Jacobson had been good men. Now they were a warning. Sell or die. When he got back to the house, Lily was at the kitchen table, her hands and face dusted with flour. Mrs. Porter was teaching her how to knead dough. The simple, peaceful scene made his chest ache. Papa, Lily said, is Miss Abigail still asleep? I want to show her my pony. She needs her rest, Mrs. Porter said before he could answer, and you need to finish your chores. Nathaniel poured a cup of coffee. It was black and bitter, just how he liked it. Any sign of them? Mrs. Porter asked, her voice low. None, he said. The snow's too deep, but they'll be back. Blackwood never gives up. Mrs. Porter's voice turned hard as iron. Not since St. Louis. Nathaniel looked at her sharply. What about St. Louis? The housekeeper shrugged, but her eyes were cunning. Miss Hayes. She carries herself like a city woman, and there was a letter in her coat pocket. I saw the postmark when I hung it to dry. You went through her things. I was looking for identification, Mrs. Porter said without a hint of apology, in case the fever took her in the night. Just then, Abigail appeared in the doorway. She was holding Samuel, her face pale but clear. She was wearing one of Eleanor's old dresses. Seeing it on another woman sent a strange jolt through him. "Good morning," she said softly. "I hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," he said. "How are you feeling?" "The fever's gone." She shifted Samuel in her arms, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. "And the baby?" The infant looked 100 times better. His cheeks had some color. His dark eyes were open and curious. "He's hungry," Abigail said with a small smile. "I take that as a good sign." As she sat at the table, Lily ran over to her, studying her with wide, serious eyes. "That was my mama's dress," she announced before she went to heaven. Abigail's hand went to the worn fabric. "Mrs. Porter was kind enough to lend it to me." "It looks nice on you," Lily said, with the simple certainty of a child. "Mama would think so, too." "Lily," Mrs. Porter said, her voice sharp, "go fetch the jam from the pantry." The girl skipped away, leaving a thick silence behind her. "You'll have to forgive my daughter," Nathaniel said. "She speaks of her mother, as if she's still here." "Children find ways to cope," Abigail said carefully. "My father—" She stopped herself. "He died recently. A fall." Her voice was steady, too steady. It was a line she'd practiced. Before he could ask more, Lily came back with the jam. Breakfast was a strange affair. Lily chattered on, and Abigail slowly started to relax, a real warmth in her eyes when she looked at the little girl. The two children, Samuel and Lily, seemed to have an instant connection, as if they were old friends who had been separated for a long time. After the meal, Mrs. Porter took the baby. "You two need to talk," she said, nodding toward his study, "in private." The study was his sanctuary. Books, maps, ledgers. A fire crackled in the hearth. "Please sit," he said. "Miss Hayes, Abigail, it's time to be honest. You're running from Blackwood. I need to know why." She stared at her hands, twisting them in her lap. "It's complicated." "Life and death usually are," he said. "Two of my men are dead. I need to know what I'm up against." She took a deep breath. "I work for Blackwood in St. Louis, as a bookkeeper. My father was a lawyer. He was investigating Blackwood's business dealings. 6 months ago, he fell down a flight of stairs. They called it an accident." "You don't think it was?" It wasn't a question. "I know it wasn't," she said, anger flashing in her eyes. "The police wouldn't listen. Blackwood owns half the city. They said I was a hysterical daughter." "So you got a job with him to find out what your father knew?" "Yes," she said. "I got access to his private records. Blackwood isn't just a businessman. He's an arms dealer, a blackmailer. He's fueling conflicts with the native tribes to drive down land prices. And he found out you were spying on him." "Not exactly," she said. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "I found something else. Documents, letters, about your wife, about Eleanor." The world seemed to stop. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. "What about my wife?" "There were letters," she said, her voice soft now, "between Blackwood and a man they only called the doctor. They mentioned Eleanor by name. They were discussing her pregnancy, her health." A block of ice formed in Nathaniel's gut. "Eleanor died during childbirth. There were complications." "That's what the record says," Abigail said, her voice gentle but firm. "But these letters, they hinted that it wasn't an accident. They talked about the Morgan problem being resolved right after she died." He felt the blood drain from his face. Eleanor's paranoia, her fear that someone was tampering with her medicine. He'd dismissed it all. "Are you telling me Blackwood had my wife murdered?" The words came out as a choked whisper. "I'm telling you there's evidence that he was involved," she corrected him gently. "Why?" he asked, his hands clenched into fists on the arms of his chair. "Why would he do that?" "I don't know for sure, but the letters kept mentioning the Evans connection." "Evans," Nathaniel said. "That was Eleanor's maiden name. Did she have a sister?" Abigail asked. "Clara," he said, a faint memory stirring. But she died in a fire years ago, before I even met Eleanor. The letters mention a Clara, Abigail said, her voice dropping lower. In the present tense, as recently as 8 months ago. The implication was monstrous. Clara alive all this time? A prisoner? There's more, Abigail said, taking another deep breath. It's about Samuel. He's not my son. Nathaniel stared at her, his mind reeling. He's not your son? His mother was a servant in Blackwood's house, a young woman named Clara Evans. The room spun. Clara, Eleanor's sister, held captive by Blackwood, and she'd had a child who was now sleeping in the next room, his wife's nephew, his own family. Samuel is Eleanor's nephew, he said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. Clara died giving birth to him, Abigail explained. Another servant hid the baby. She knew Blackwood would get rid of him. She came to me, begged me to take Samuel and run. And the father? Clara never said, but the servant believed it was Blackwood himself. Nathaniel stood up, pacing the small room like a caged animal. All the pieces were clicking into place. Blackwood's obsession with his land, the murder of his men, the relentless pursuit of Abigail. It was all connected. That's why he's hunting you, he said. Samuel isn't just evidence. He's an heir, Clara's heir. And possibly Blackwood's, she added quietly. He turned to face her. You were right to run, but you can't run forever. I know that now. One more thing, he said, studying her face. Why did you do it? Why risk your life for a child that wasn't yours? She met his gaze without flinching. Because my father taught me that turning a blind eye to evil makes you a part of it. The simple honesty of her words hit him harder than any bullet. This woman, this stranger, had more courage than any 10 men he knew. Well, Miss Hayes, he said, a new resolve hardening his voice. It seems you and Samuel are in this fight with me now. Blackwood isn't going to stop coming, not for you, and not for me. What are we going to do? She asked. First, he said, we prepare for a war. Then we find a way to burn his entire world to the ground. A sharp knock on the door made them both jump. Mrs. Porter stood there, Samuel in her arms, but she wasn't looking at them. She was looking out the kitchen window. You'd better come see this, she said, her voice grim. Through the window they could see a single black sleigh moving toward the ranch, cutting a dark line through the pure white snow. Visitors, Mrs. Porter said, and I have a feeling they aren't here for coffee. Nathaniel's hand went to his rifle. Get Lily and Samuel to the root cellar. Now. He squinted at the approaching sleigh. Abigail, stay with them. Who is it? She asked, her voice trembling as she took Samuel from Mrs. Porter. I'm not sure yet, he said, but I'm not waiting to find out. The sleigh was getting closer, dark, silent, a hearse gliding over the snow. The sleigh stopped. Nathaniel stood on the porch, his rifle held ready but not aimed. Mrs. Porter had rushed Lily and Abigail down to the root cellar, an old reinforced shelter under the house. I don't want to go, Lily had protested, her small face set in a stubborn frown. Mama says it's not the bad men. Who is it then, Lily? He'd asked, his hand pausing on the door. The sheriff, she'd said. He's not here to hurt us. And she was right. As the figure climbed down from the sleigh, Nathaniel recognized the weathered face of Sheriff Michael Donovan. He relaxed, but only a little. Donovan was a good man, but he was still the law. Morgan, the sheriff called out, his hands in plain sight. Got a minute? It's a long ride for a short chat, Sheriff, Nathaniel said. Donovan's eyes flicked to the rifle, then back to his face. Heard about Collins and Jacobson. Damn shame. It was, Nathaniel agreed, but I don't think you came all this way just to offer condolences. Partly, the sheriff said, trudging through the snow. Also to give you a warning. Blackwood was in town, stirring up trouble. Says you're harboring a fugitive. His sharp eyes bored into Nathaniel. A woman and a child, he says, wanted for theft and kidnapping back in St. Louis. Nathaniel's face was a mask of stone. Is that a fact? That's his story, Donovan said. Funny thing is, he knew exactly when she arrived, last night. Same night your men were killed. He stomped the snow off his boots. Mind if I come in? It's colder than a banker's heart out here. Nathaniel stepped aside. Coffee's on. Inside, he poured 2 cups, adding a healthy splash of whiskey to each. So what's Blackwood's play? Donovan took a long sip. He's claiming a woman named Abigail Hayes stole from his company and kidnapped an infant. He wants me to come out here and arrest her. And you believe him? I believe Blackwood is a snake, the sheriff said. But the law is the law. I have to ask you, Morgan, is the woman here? Before Nathaniel could answer, the door from the kitchen opened. Abigail stood there, her head held high, Samuel asleep on her shoulder. I am Abigail Hayes, she said, her voice clear and strong, and I am not a criminal. Sheriff Donovan's eyebrows shot up, but his face remained unreadable. Ma'am, Blackwood is very eager to find you. I'm sure he is, she said, stepping forward. He's the criminal, Sheriff. I have proof. Proof of arms smuggling, blackmail, and murder. Those are serious charges, Donovan said, his eyes sharp. My father was investigating him before he was killed, she continued. Thomas Hayes, Donovan said, surprising them both. I read about his death. The report mentioned a daughter who contested the ruling. They wouldn't listen, Abigail said. And the child? Donovan's gaze shifted to Samuel. Abigail glanced at Nathaniel, who gave her a slight nod. His name is Samuel. His mother was Clara Evans, Eleanor Morgan's sister. Blackwood held her prisoner for years. She died in childbirth. Donovan let out a long, slow breath. So the boy, he's your nephew, Morgan. Eleanor's blood. The sheriff drained his cup and stood up. Officially, I have to investigate Blackwood's claims. Unofficially, I've been waiting for a chance to take that man down for years. He put on his coat. Blackwood is demanding I bring you in, Miss Hayes. I can stall him. Say the roads are out, but only for a few days. You need to get me that proof. Most of it is back in St. Louis, Abigail admitted, but I have notes. I can write down everything I know. You do that, the sheriff said. He turned to Nathaniel. And you watch your back. Blackwood is cornered, and a cornered snake is when it's most dangerous. After the sheriff left, Abigail looked at Nathaniel. Can we trust him? Donovan is a good man, Nathaniel said, but he's just one man. If we can't get him the proof he needs in time, we'll have to handle Blackwood ourselves. He looked at the sleeping baby in her arms. He threatened my family. That's a mistake he's only going to make once. A new unspoken alliance formed between them in that moment. They were no longer just a rancher and a fugitive. They were partners. Nathaniel, she said, her voice softer now. There's something else. Your finances. I saw a letter from the bank. The ranch is in trouble. His face hardened. Pride was a Morgan trait. We've had a few bad years. I know, she said quickly, but I was trained as an accountant. Let me look at your books. Let me help. It's the only way I can repay you. He studied her for a long moment. Pride against survival. Survival won. He nodded toward his study. The ledgers are in the desk. It's a mess. Few things worth saving ever are, she replied. And in that moment, she sounded so much like Eleanor, it made his heart stop. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm, a quiet war. Abigail pored over the ledgers, her mind sharp and clear. Nathaniel and his men fortified the ranch, turning it into a makeshift fortress. Every man carried a rifle. Patrols ran day and night. The ranch was an armed camp, waiting for the inevitable. Lily, oblivious to the coming storm, attached herself to Abigail and Samuel. She would sing to the baby, strange old lullabies that Nathaniel could have sworn were Eleanor's. One evening, Abigail came to him as he cleaned his rifle by the fire. I've been through the books, and she said, it's bad, but it's not hopeless. The bank seems to think it is. The bank is wrong, she said, her eyes shining with an intensity he hadn't seen before. You're spread too thin. Sell off the north pasture. It's poor grazing land. Use the money to invest in horses, good breeding stock. The army is paying top dollar for mounts. It had been Eleanor's dream, the horse program. After she died, the dream had died with her. The pain was too much. You've really thought about this, he said, impressed. My father insisted I learn the business, she said. A shadow passed over her face. He said a woman with financial independence is a woman with options. He sounds like a wise man. He was, she said softly, and it got him killed. An uneasy silence settled between them. Abigail, he said finally, we need to talk about what happens after. After Blackwood. What are your plans? She seemed surprised by the question. I, I haven't thought that far ahead. Will you go back to St. Louis? She shook her head. There's nothing for me there. And Samuel? He asked, his gaze drifting to the cradle. He's my family. Eleanor's blood. I have a responsibility to him. I understand, she said, her voice tight. He should be with his family. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. I'm not trying to take him from you. I'm asking what you want. For both of you. What I want, she repeated the words like they were a foreign language. I want Samuel to be safe, to be loved. I want a place where we belong. The words hit him like a physical blow. He'd been alone for so long, a ghost in his own home. This ranch could be that place, he heard himself say. There's room. There's work. Lily adores you both. Her eyes widened. Are you offering us a home? I'm suggesting we consider it, he said, once this is all over. Their conversation was cut short by Mrs. Porter appearing in the doorway, her face grim. It's Lily, she said. She's having a nightmare. She's calling for her mother. And for you, she added, looking at Abigail. They found Lily sitting bolt upright in her bed, her eyes wide with terror. Papa, Miss Abigail, you have to listen. Mama's trying to show you something. Show us what, sweetheart? Nathaniel asked, sitting on the bed. The hidden things, Lily whispered, her voice trembling. In the walls, in the barn, in the old tack room, the one that burned. Nathaniel went cold. The old tack room had burned down 5 years ago, the night after Eleanor's funeral. Lily had been a baby. There was no way she could remember that. What things, Lily? Abigail asked gently. Mama's box, she said, grabbing her father's hand. The box with the truth inside. She says you have to find it. Tonight, before the bad men come back. She says there's no more time. The urgency in her voice was terrifying. He'd learned to trust these feelings, these messages from a place he couldn't understand. All right, he said. I'll go look now. Not alone, Lily insisted, her eyes wild. Miss Abigail has to go with you. Mama says she's the key. They left Mrs. Porter sitting with the children, a loaded shotgun resting across her lap. Outside, the night was crystal clear and freezing cold. The stars looked like chips of ice. Do you believe her? Abigail asked as they crossed the snowy yard to the barn. I believe my daughter knows things she shouldn't, he said. And if Eleanor is watching over us, I find that more comforting than frightening. Inside the barn, he led her to the far corner, to a section of wall that had been rebuilt after the fire. Lily said, in the walls, Abigail murmured, running her hand along the rough planks. Nathaniel felt it then, a single board that was smoother than the others, newer. He pushed. It gave way, revealing a dark, narrow space. He reached inside and his fingers brushed against cold metal. He pulled out a small, smoke-stained box. The lock was rusted shut, but taped to the bottom was a small key. Eleanor, always so thorough. He opened it. Inside was a stack of letters, a small leather journal, and a photograph he'd never seen before. It was a young Eleanor, her arm around another woman who looked so much like her, it took his breath away. Her sister. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, it said, Eleanor and Clara, St. Louis, 1875. Clara, Abigail whispered, looking over his shoulder. Samuel's mother. He unfolded the first letter. It was from Clara, dated just weeks before Eleanor's death. My dearest Eleanor, I pray this finds you. B's men watch everything, but Dr. H has promised to deliver this. The documents you seek are real. I've seen them. Ledgers detailing B's crimes. But there's more. He's planning to take everything in the Wyoming territory. Your husband's ranch is the first piece. I am a prisoner, Eleanor, but Dr. H has shown me kindness. Perhaps he can help me escape. If anything happens, find the doctor. He knows everything. Love, Clara. Dr. H, he murmured. The same doctor from the letters you found. He picked up the journal. It was Eleanor's. The last entry was dated 3 days before she died. Dr. Holloway visited again. He fusses over my medicine, but I see the look in his eyes. I've stopped taking it. I pour it out and refill the bottle with sugar water. When I don't take it, my mind is clear. When I do, the world is a fog. Anna doesn't believe me. He trusts H. How can I make him see? The truth is, with Clara's letters, protect our child. Nathaniel's hands started to shake. Dr. Malcolm Holloway, he said, his voice a raw whisper. He was my friend. I served with him in the war. I invited him here. He delivered Lily. And he poisoned your wife, Abigail finished softly, on Blackwood's orders. I trusted him, Nathaniel said, the rage and grief of 5 years boiling over. I brought a murderer into my home. He looked at Abigail, a new terrible purpose in his eyes. We have it now. The proof, the motive, everything. As they turned to leave the barn, a horse whinnied nervously, then another. The whole barn was suddenly filled with the sound of anxious animals. Nathaniel blew out the lantern, plunging them into darkness. They're here, he whispered, drawing his revolver. Through a crack in the door, they could see them. Dark shapes on horseback, moving silently toward the house. Blackwood's men, he said, at least half a dozen. How did they know? Abigail whispered, her voice tight with fear. Maybe the same way Lily did, he said grimly. He pushed the metal box into her hands. There's a tunnel, from here to the root cellar. The entrance is behind the last stall. Go. Warn Mrs. Porter. Protect the children. You can't go out there alone. Go, he said, already moving toward the side door. Just then, a gunshot ripped through the night, followed by shouting from the bunkhouse. The fight had begun. Abigail ran, finding the hidden trapdoor. She crawled through the dark, damp tunnel, the sounds of the gunfight raging above her. Gunshots, screaming men, the terrified shrieks of horses. She pushed open the trapdoor on the other end. It opened into the pantry. The house was silent, too silent. Mrs. Porter? She whispered. No answer. She crept out of the pantry. The kitchen was empty. In the main room, a single rocking chair was creaking back and forth in the moonlight. Her blood ran cold. She moved toward the sound. And then she saw him, Harrison Blackwood. He was sitting in the rocking chair, calm as a man at his own fireside. In one hand, he held a heavy walking stick. In the other, he cradled a sleeping Samuel, and tied to a chair beside him, gagged and bound, was Mrs. Porter. Miss Hayes, Blackwood said, his voice smooth as silk. I've been expecting you. Where is Lily? Abigail demanded, her heart pounding against her ribs. Perfectly safe, Blackwood said with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. With my associate, Dr. Holloway. A simple exchange, Miss Hayes. The child and that box you're holding for the girl's life. You're a monster. I'm a businessman, he corrected her. And that child, he said, nodding at Samuel, is my property. He is my son. The confession hung in the air, more shocking than any gunshot. Samuel, Blackwood's own son. Clara would never have. Clara did what she was told, Blackwood said, his voice turning to ice. And she gave me an heir, my legacy. Something Morgan tried to take from me once before, when he stole Eleanor. His composure finally cracked, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. She was promised to me. He took her, but he won't take my son. He pulled out a pocket watch. My men will keep Morgan busy. Dr. Holloway is waiting for my signal. If I don't walk out of here with that child and those documents in 20 minutes, he has his orders concerning the girl. I need to see her, Abigail said, her mind racing. Proof that she's alive. Blackwood nodded and blew a small silver whistle. The front door opened. Dr. Holloway stood there, his medical bag in one hand, and with his other hand on her shoulder, he held a terrified Lily. Miss Abigail, she cried. It's all right, Lily, Abigail said, forcing a calm she didn't feel. She turned back to Blackwood. Let them go. Mrs. Porter and Lily. You can have the box. And the boy, Blackwood added. First the boy, then the box, then the girl is free to go. Just as Abigail took a step forward, a voice boomed from the doorway. Blackwood! Nathaniel stood there, his face bloody, his shirt torn, but his rifle was leveled squarely at Blackwood's chest. Let go of my nephew. Relief washed over Abigail, but it died a second later. Holloway was fast. He pulled a pistol from his bag and pressed the cold steel barrel to Lily's temple. "Drop the rifle, Morgan," the doctor said, his voice calm and steady, "or the girl dies." The room was frozen in a terrible standoff. Nathaniel in the doorway, Holloway with the gun to Lily's head, Blackwood with Samuel in his arms. And in that awful silent moment, Lily's small voice cut through the tension. "Mama says it's time," she said, her voice strangely calm. "She says the truth can't stay buried." A sudden, unnatural wind swept through the room, making the lanterns flicker and dance. The windows rattled in their frames, and in the shifting, ghostly light, the color drained from Harrison Blackwood's face. He was staring into the empty space behind Nathaniel, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it was paralyzing. "Eleanor," he whispered, and the house began to scream. Blackwood's face was a mask of pure terror. He wasn't looking at Nathaniel anymore. He was looking past him, at something only he could see. "Impossible," he stammered, his grip on the sleeping baby loosening. "You're dead." In that split second of distraction, Nathaniel lunged. He snatched Lily from Holloway's grasp just as the doctor fired. The bullet went wide, burying itself in the wall. The wind howled through the house, sending papers flying. A lamp crashed to the floor, and flames began to lick at the dry wooden planks. "Get the child!" Mrs. Porter screamed through her gag. Abigail didn't hesitate. She rushed forward and pulled Samuel from Blackwood's unresisting arms. Holloway, seeing his employer completely undone, turned his pistol on Abigail. "Nobody leaves!" he shrieked. But before he could fire, Mrs. Porter, now free of her gag, swung a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. It connected with Holloway's arm with a sickening crack. The gun clattered to the floor. Nathaniel was on him in an instant, smashing the butt of his rifle into the doctor's face. Holloway went down in a bloody heap. "Get the children out!" Nathaniel yelled as the fire began to spread, climbing the walls like a hungry beast. "The box!" he shouted to Abigail. "Don't forget the box!" She scooped it up from the floor, but as she turned to run, a new sound cut through the chaos, the click of a hammer being cocked. Blackwood was on his feet, a small derringer in his hand, aimed at Nathaniel's back. "You won't take what's mine," he hissed, his eyes wild with madness. "Not again." "Nathaniel!" Abigail screamed. He spun around just as Blackwood fired. The bullet tore through his shoulder instead of his heart. He staggered, but he didn't fall. He raised his own rifle. "It's over, Blackwood." "That's where you're wrong," a new voice called from the doorway. Sheriff Donovan stood there, a shotgun in his hands flanked by two deputies. "Your men are all dead or in custody, Blackwood." The whole damn territory heard the gunfight. Seeing his empire crumbling, Blackwood made one last, desperate move. He lunged for Abigail and the baby. "My son!" he screamed. Nathaniel's rifle fired. The sound was deafening. Blackwood stumbled backward, a dark stain spreading across his chest. He looked down at the wound, a strange look of surprise on his face, then collapsed. "Not your son," Nathaniel said, his voice cold as the grave. "My family." The fire was everywhere now. A burning beam crashed down from the ceiling. "Everybody out!" Donovan yelled. They scrambled out into the freezing night air, coughing, choking, as the home they had fought for was devoured by flames. Outside, Nathaniel finally collapsed from the blood loss. Abigail was there to catch him, holding him with one arm and the baby with the other. "I've got you," she whispered. The sheriff's men rounded up the wounded Holloway. Donovan took the metal box from Abigail. "This is it?" he asked. "Everything you need to hang them both," she said. They huddled together against the barn wall, watching the house burn, a strange, broken little group. Lily crawled up next to her father. "Mama says you'll be okay now, Papa," she said. "She says the bad men are gone." Nathaniel managed a weak smile. He reached out and let Samuel's tiny hand wrap around his finger. "Welcome home, little one," he whispered. They had lost their home, but in the smoke and the chaos, they had found something else. They had found each other. They had become a family. "Stay," Nathaniel murmured to Abigail, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Help me rebuild." She started to say, but the words caught in her throat. Mrs. Porter, ever practical, took the now crying Samuel from her arms. "There will be time for talk in the morning," she said. "For now, we survive." As they moved toward the foreman's cabin, the only building left standing, Abigail looked back at the fire. It was a funeral pyre for the past, and from the ashes she knew something new was going to grow. The days that followed were a blur of healing and rebuilding. A doctor came and patched up Nathaniel's shoulder. Sheriff Donovan confirmed that Blackwood had survived, but would stand trial along with Holloway. The evidence in Eleanor's box was ironclad. As the snows began to melt, the ranch came back to life. Men cleared the wreckage of the old house. Plans were drawn for a new one, stronger, safer. A home built not just on wood and stone, but on survival and hope. The quiet partnership between Nathaniel and Abigail grew into something more. They worked side by side, raising the children, planning the future. They didn't talk about what they were becoming. They didn't have to. It was just right. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the small cabin, he finally asked, "I'm asking you to stay, Abigail," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Not as a guest, as my partner, as my wife." Tears welled in her eyes. She thought of her long, desperate journey, the fear, the loss. And she looked at this man, this small, fierce family she had found in the middle of a storm. "What about Eleanor?" she whispered. "She will always be a part of this family," he said. "She's the reason you're here. She led you to us." He took her hand. "She brought you home." Before Abigail could answer, there was a knock on the door. Mrs. Porter stood there, a strange look on her face. "There's a visitor," she said. A tall, distinguished-looking man stepped out of the shadows. He looked tired, worn, but his eyes. Abigail knew those eyes. Her heart stopped. "Father," she whispered, "you're dead." "Not quite," Thomas Hayes said, a sad smile on his face. "Though Blackwood did his best. I had to fake my death, my dear. It was the only way to continue my investigation without him knowing. It was supposed to be for a few weeks, but then you disappeared. It took me months to find you." Abigail could only stare, the world tilting on its axis once again. Her father, alive. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. "I'm so sorry I had to put you through that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's over now. Blackwood's empire is finished. We have him." He stepped back and looked at the small cabin, at Nathaniel, at the two children sleeping peacefully. A look of profound understanding passed between him and Nathaniel. "It seems," he said, his eyes twinkling for the first time, "that you've been busy building an empire of your own." Abigail looked at Nathaniel, and a slow smile spread across her face, a real smile, full of a future she never thought she would have. She took his hand. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, I will." They rebuilt their home, and they rebuilt their lives, a family forged in fire and ice. Blackwood and Holloway were sentenced to hang. Their dark chapter finally closed. And on quiet nights when the Wyoming wind howled, it no longer sounded like a scream. It sounded like a lullaby. If you were moved by this story of survival and justice, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales from the edge of the world.